Hello everyone, this is Crystal Swinger with Cabarrus Health Alliance Environmental Health. I am recording this presentation in regards to the 2800 sanitation rules. We had a 3-day workshop, regional meeting, and as a result I have some updates and some clarifications in regards to your inspection. So, I just want to emphasize at the beginning that these are not new rules. They are no different from what we have already. It's just some clarifications that we have that came about through the restructuring of DCDEE and our relationship to them. So just going over a few items here. So we'll start with kitchen accessibility. Kitchens are not required to be locked. If there is a child that is in the kitchen area, then it is a supervision problem, not a hazard problem for the kitchen area itself. Now, we always encourage and help facilitate so that the kitchen is not accessible to the children or a walkway or in any way inviting for them to be in there without any kind of supervision. So in regards to kitchen accessibility, since it's not required to be locked, if you look under 2820B in the rules, under hazards, it specifically states that the hazards have to be stored in a locked storage room or cabinet when not in use. So how that affects the kitchen is whether or not your kitchen is locked, those hazards in the kitchen need to be under lock and key. So either a storage room or underneath a sink with a little latch and lock or chain and lock is sufficient. And I would expect that if no one is in the kitchen, that this area be locked. If someone is in there, I would think that that would be in use and not required to be locked. So, just to reiterate, whether or not you lock the kitchen door or not does not matter in regards to locking up hazards. So just make sure that there's an area where all your hazards are in one place, that you can lock it, put the key up right there, and then whether or not you lock the kitchen door is above and beyond what's required in this situation. Plumbing. These are for specifically bathrooms. Any kind of adult or staff bathroom that is not being locked, that has a water greater than 110, needs to be tempered. So any kind of water that's accessible to children. So if the bathroom door down the hallway is a staff bathroom and the door is wide open and children are walking by, then that water needs to be tempered 80 to 110. If you want it just for the adults and the water's over 110, you can have it a lock and key and hang up that key right next to the door. Now the exception to this is if you have a bathroom and the sole purpose of that design bathroom was to be handicap accessible to a child, but you do not have a child that's using that at this time, so you're just using it as a staff bathroom, then it has to be tempered no matter what. It doesn't matter if you lock the door or not. If that original design of that bathroom is for a handicapped child, then it needs to be tempered. All right, as a side note, I have had some questions in regards to portable sinks. And a portable sink looks like a diaper changing cart, but it also has a sink right next to it in the station itself, and underneath the cabinetry of the basement of the sink is 2 containers. One has fresh water and one is a collection for wastewater, and you somehow do a foot pedal or a hand crank or some way to get the water that comes through, kind of like an RV camping, I guess. It comes through out the water in the faucet, and then the wastewater collects into that collection bin underneath, and then when that's full, you're supposed to go out and empty that into the can wash or the toilet or the sink or something like this. These are not allowed, and they are not allowed because plumbing code does not allow these in facilities. So you can have that structure, the portable sink, but you have to hard plumb it into the wall. So I'm not saying you can't have the sink within the diaper changing cart. It just can't be a freestanding dump out the bucket when it's full. All right, let's move on to food. And here I'll just touch on sinks as well. We have a a section of that little bit later on. But food in the classrooms. If you have a classroom that has diaper changing, then you have a diaper changing hand sink where children and teachers wash their hands after changing a child. Now, if that room also has any kind of food prep area, such as the infant room or the young toddler's room, then if there is a bottle warmer, a refrigerator, a countertop, anything of that nature, then there is a hand sink there as well where you are to wash your hands before preparing food. So 2 separate sinks, 2 separate areas. And just an easy way to remember that is this is like a mini kitchen area. If you have your cook, she goes to the bathroom, she washes her hands. She comes to the kitchen, and before she starts preparing food, she washes her hands in the hand sink that's in the kitchen area. So she's done it twice at 2 different sinks. Now you can put that into the infant room. You're doing the same thing. You're washing your hands at the diaper changing hand sink, which is the equivalent of a bathroom sink because we're doing toileting and fecal matter handling. And then you go over to the hand sink at the food prep area and you wash your hands there before preparing food. And that preparation is deemed as warming bottles, mixing bottles, preparing baby food, and where this comes into play in other classrooms is the divvying out of bulk food. So if there is a 3-year-old classroom, everybody's potty trained, and there's a sink in that classroom, you can use that as your food prep hand sink if you want to divvy out bulk foods. And what I mean by this is if there's a gigantic container of cheese balls and each child gets a scoop of cheese balls onto their paper towels, then you are dividing and portioning food, which is considered food prep. There had to be a definition, and that's just where they do the line of what food prep is. So you would need to wash your hands in that sink to be able to portion out those foods for the children. Now, if you do not have a sink in that classroom, that's not in the bathroom, what you can do is different things. You can either go to the kitchen and wash your hands and divvy out the food there. You can have the snacks already delivered to the classrooms, pre-portioned out, a scoop of cheese balls and a stack of paper towels all on top of each other, and you just hand it out to the children. Or you can have individually pre-portioned snacks already commercially made in that way. So there's always questions about hand sinks, and really a lot of it is specific to your situation, what you're doing, and what your facility has. So if you need to have some advice, if you have a change of use, just call and let me know, and we can set up a time to come out there and look to see what you want to do and what facilities that you have. All right, so also with the employees' food, it doesn't differentiate in the rules between food brought from home for children or for staff. So if food is brought from home, we need to have it labeled in some way. And that could either be a staff refrigerator, or if you're going to use the main refrigerator in the kitchen, it could be a shelf, this is for employees' food only, or a section that's kind of portioned off in some way. So when you open the refrigerator, I can easily see, all right, that's for the staff, and the rest of the food is for the children. Now, if you're going to just commingle it, a couple sandwiches here and there, then on that food brought from home from the employee, it needs to have the employee's name and the date on it. And that's fine as well. That would be considered labeling and identified. And just as a side note, all hand sinks should have soap and towels at that hand sink. So if you have 2 sinks in your classrooms, both of them should have soap and paper towels, unless they are right up against each other or have some kind of barrier, but really they should have their own supply of soap and paper towels at all times. All right, disinfectant. The one thing I want to touch on is chloroglass. It is a type of disinfectant, and the reason I bring this up, specifically chloroglass, is because it used to be just a sanitizer, and that was approved as a sanitizer for use, but EPA has gone back and reevaluated their chemicals, and now it can be used as a sanitizer and as a disinfectant. Now, chloroglass, the main ingredient is trichloramelamine, TCM is what you might see on the active ingredient, and it's also in other types of sanitizers and disinfectants, like A to B is trichloromelamine. It is different from your Clorox. They both have chlorine in them, but they have different chemical structures, which allows them to kill bacteria differently and read differently on test strips. So they have their own test strips, the TCM does. So these are allowed because it is EPA approved, but just know that the Chloroglass as a sanitizer has a 2-minute contact time, and as a disinfectant it has a 10-minute contact time. So it has to be wet for 10 minutes for it to be a disinfectant. So there's all kinds of different chemicals that are out there. Quaternary ammonia are very good and stable disinfectants and sanitizers, but they have the 10-minute contact time. And I don't really know of anything other than the Clorox and bleach solution that you're making yourselves that has a shorter time equivalent to 2 minutes or less. I have not seen that come across yet. So if you're out there and you're looking and you find some chemicals that you want to know if you can use, just give me the information as far as the name of the chemical and the label, because the label will tell the directions of how long of a contact time it's going to need and for what surface. And this can be submitted to our office, and I can let you know within a couple days whether that's going to work or not, as far as approval, and then whether you want to use that in your center or not. As far as test strips, they are required for the sanitizer and the disinfectant. Right? If you're using the bleach and the water, make sure that you're preparing on site, and that seems to go well. But the test strips are not necessary if you have an alternative disinfectant. So for instance, in the schools they're using the maximum 126. Those are not required to have test strips. Okay. Like I said, I don't know any other chemical that has less than a 10-minute contact time that's not the bleach and water that you're mixing up. But there could be. There's new chemicals coming across all the time. All right, so back to sinks. This is not new, but just reiterating that if you have a hand wash sink and it's got the old-timey fountain that's right there attached to it, the combination, you can either use one or the other. It can either be a water fountain or it can be a hand sink, but it cannot be both. You can't be washing your hands, splashing stuff onto the faucet, and then drinking out of that at the same time. That doesn't seem to be a problem, but sometimes if you have an outfit that you come across some of those combinations. All right, so just going over toys to be cleaned. So there's 3 different ways we can clean the toys, or 3 different areas. One way, 3 different areas. One way is in the kitchen, in the 3-compartment sink, where you wash, you rinse, and you sanitize. And that is the same procedure as you would do your dishes and your utensils, because if it's a mouthable toy that needs to be sanitized, it's going in your mouth, same as utensils, it goes in your mouth, same process. So it's either in the 3-compartment hand sink in the kitchen, or in the dish machine or dishwasher on the Sani cycle. Okay. The second area is at the food prep hand sink within the classroom. So the classroom that has a food prep hand sink, it would be considered a change of use, because now we are cleaning toys, not washing hands. So we disinfect the sink, spray it down, leave it wet for 2 minutes, kind of rinse it off. And the process is written out in 2822 in section A. So the process is we're going to wash it with soap and water. So you'd fill up the sink, put the toys in there, and I want to just point out that it says and a brush. On 28A1 it says and a brush. So there has to be a brush or some kind of friction tool that you can clean those toys with. It can't just be water, warm water just running over them. So make sure there's a brush there or something to be used. So wash with soapy water, and then we're going to drain that out, rinse it with clear water, drain that out, and then we're going to plug up the sink and fill it up with sanitizer, and we're going to submerge those toys for 2 minutes. So you can just get them all wet, make sure they stay in that sanitizer water for 2 minutes, and then take them out to air dry onto the countertop area. The only time I would say you could use the sanitizer to spray down toys is really if it's a very large bookshelf or the plastic kitchens or things that just are in place in the classroom. So if you can't get it into a sink, then you can spray it down with the sanitizer and leave it to air dry in that place. All right, and instead of the food prep hand sink being used, so we have the kitchen, food prep hand sink, and the third place is if you want to do buckets. If you have a very small sink and you can't get the toys in there, or it's very hard to find a way to wash the toys, rinse them, sanitize them, and do what you need to do in the classroom. A lot of people have gone to using just 3 buckets, either like the plastic thick ice cream buckets or the long rectangular buckets, but having those set up, wash, rinse, and sanitize, and getting those submerged for 2 minutes. Now, as a side note, the soft toys, the plush toys that are in the classroom, they're not required to be washed in the washing machine and dried all the time, only if they're visibly soiled. So if it looks like it's dirty, or you know that something's happened to soil it, it needs to go in the washing machine and then the dryer. But otherwise, once a week, you can put those plush toys in the dryer for high on 20 minutes, and that's going to kill lice and mites and bed bugs and any kind of other little creepy crawlies that are on those. All right, so storage. We all know about hazards and storage, but just to lightly go over this, hazard is deemed anything that says keep out of reach of children with another warning. So eye irritant, skin irritant, inhalant, danger, things of that nature, and anything aerosol has to be locked up. Lock and key, combination, magnetic lock. If it just says keep out of reach of children, it can be 5 feet up. So that includes your bulk soaps, your hand sanitizers, some lotions, some cream, sunscreens, things like that. So that's the difference between a hazard and a non-hazard. Now, underneath 2820B and D, which is storage in the rules, it says toxic substances shall be stored below or separate from medications and food, and then medications shall not be stored above food. So the issue with this is you could have a locked cabinet, open it up, and if things are stored incorrectly, you can still have a 6-point provisional demerit. Okay, so this is important. If you just think about the order, as you see down here, as a vertical storage, it makes sense. Because you do not want your cleaners on top, your medicines, and food all jumbled together. Because if something happens and one spills over the weekend, nail polish, and it drips down onto the goldfish, and you come in, well, it's all evaporated, and you just see an empty bottle of acetone, then we don't know what's contaminated and what's not. So if you look, food goes on the very top. This is if you're storing up and down vertically. Food goes on top, because if food spills on medication, it's not really contaminated. If medication spills on hazards, the hazards aren't contaminated. So your food is safe, your medications are then safe, and your cleaners are where they need to be on the very bottom. So that is the proper storage. Now, if you're going to store horizontally, all on the same shelf, then there needs to be some kind of separation as far as an area or a barrier. So a label hazards on the right-hand side. Food is going to be on the left. Medications are here in the center bucket by themselves. And if things are stored where they're supposed to be stored, then that is fine. Okay, toothbrushes, they can be stored in the bathroom area as long as they are covered with a plastic cover over the bristles, with some kind of loose covering that goes over the top of the bristles themselves, or within a cabinet door. But they can be within the bathroom area. That is fine. Okay, so before we go with this, I just want to touch on one more thing. Linens under 2821F states that the barrier of the linen must be large enough to cover the sleeping surface. So a child cannot have a washcloth size linen underneath their face between the mat. It's got to cover the sleeping surface. It doesn't have to have elastic latches on the end, although they are very helpful. It just has to be large enough to go over that area. And I understand kids roll around and toss around and move around, and these blankets get crumpled up underneath them. But if they want a blanket that is different from the linen that they're sleeping on, just to make that clear. Okay, so that concludes the majority of the updates. So what I have next is just for Kids Plus, this first screen, and then the rest of it is really specific for North Carolina pre-K programs, and that only applies to them because there are some rules now that do not apply to the pre-K programs. So just wanted to touch on that. So Kids Plus, okay, the approved space that has been measured for everyday use will be inspected every day during every inspection visit. So this means that the floor plans that you have a room that you've been measured for that tells you your capacity. Whatever that room is what's going to be inspected every time, along with what you use every day. So if you eat snack in the cafeteria and you use the gang bathrooms outside the cafeteria, those are your areas that are going to be inspected every time. Now, you also have auxiliary spaces. And these auxiliary spaces are defined as areas that you do not go to every day, but that you are allowed to go to. So if you go to the computer lab once a week, you go to the art room once a week, we go to the gym twice a week, or whatever the area is. If you're not going there every single day, that's deemed an auxiliary space. Those auxiliary spaces will not be inspected unless the children are there at the time of the inspection. So if I go in, your floor plan is the cafeteria, room 101, and the playground. I'm going to inspect those. Well, the kids are also in the art room right now as I'm walking through. Well, I'm going to go down and inspect the art room and just make sure all the hazards are locked up and all of that is in place. Now, on the way to the art room, which is an auxiliary space, the janitor closet doors are open on both sides and there's no one around and there's hazards just glaring at you. That will not be demerited. That is not the responsibility of the Kids Plus program, but it will be documented that if there's no one within earshot of those doors being open, then we kind of need to come up with something a little bit better. That if they're going to be farther down away on the other side of the school building, that they need to lock those doors because children are still there after school. But it will not be demerited for the Kids Plus because that's not under their control. Okay, so that is something new, and that'll include the bulbs that are not shatterproof or covered in the computer lab rooms. If the kids are not in there and it's auxiliary space, you will not be demerited for those. Okay, so this is just for the pre-K programs. So not for Kids Plus, just pre-K programs only. And this is a result of the House Bill 1031 that came through when DCD had more at 4 and that dissolved, and now the pre-K program came through. They changed to DCD-EE, which is the early education. And part of that, this House bill was attached to it, and this is what we have to work with right now. So let me go over some of these things here. All right, under toilets, under 2817, these are things that are not required of the pre-K programs. They are not required to have a hand sink at the toilet that's adjacent to or included in this area. Now, they have to have a hand sink somewhere, but it doesn't have to be at that specific location. It also is not required to be child-sized nor adapted to adult-sized seats. So these toilet areas don't have to be child-sized or adapted toilet seats, but it does have to be accessible. So the kids have to be able to get up to that toilet. If you have little 4-year-olds that are small to start with, they have to have some kind of stool to get up to that toilet. All right, so under number 21 on your inspection sheet, you can cross out properly sized and located. Those will not be factors. But the toilets do have to be accessible, in good repair, cleaned, and disinfected. All right, under lavatories, which is your hand sinks, they do not have to be mounted at the height to accommodate children. They do not have to be child-sized, the sinks. They do have to be located, accessible, a good repair, clean, and disinfected. So if they're way high and you got little kids, they have to be accessible. So they have to have a stool, a step stool of some sort to be able to get up to wash their hands, but that does not affect the mounted level of the sink. All right, so floors. Under a 2824 A, B, and C, not required to have non-absorbent flooring in the laundry or food prep areas. Not required to have easily cleanable flooring in the play area. Not required to vacuum or extraction clean wall-to-wall carpet every 6 months. Not required. So what is required? For floors, floors have to be clean and good repair. That's it. Clean and in good repair. All right, as far as walls and ceilings, not required to have easily cleanable walls or ceilings. Not required to have non-absorbent walls and ceilings in food handling areas. So for walls and ceilings, what is required is that they're clean and in good repair. And that's it. All right, lighting and thermal environment. They are not required to meet the 10 to 50 foot candle illuminations, and this is only measured on new construction just to make sure there's adequate lighting to clean and be able to see where things are, and this will not apply to pre-K programs. They're also not required to have shatterproof or shielded bulbs. So this is for pre-K only, but they're not required to have shatterproof or shielded bulbs. So under 39 on the inspection sheet, the only thing that applies is that the equipment is clean and in good repair. That's it. As far as waste, 2830, they're not required to have a specific can wash area, which is usually a 3x3 pad that's sloped to drain with hot and cold faucets with a mixing valve and a Y hose, backwash, preventer. None of that is required. What is required on number 44 is that the solid waste is properly handled and the containers and cleaning equipment are kept clean. And that's all. So that concludes the update for sanitation. If you have any questions or concerns, feel free to call me or email me at any time. If it's something very specific to your center, I'd be glad to meet you on site and we can look at it then. And thanks for listening.